Amy, she, her pronouns, cohort 2. And I want to, I sometimes lead with this in certain circles. I'm the luckiest one. I got to study with Jean as an undergrad at Rutgers Newark, and I also got to study with her um, in when I was doing the doc program nearly 20 years ago. And it's such a pleasure to be here.
Jose.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. My name is Jose Luis Jimenez. I am a principal of an elementary school in Ridgewood, Queens, and I'm also a PhD student representing cohort 17. Excited to be here. I think this is, my life's work on how to make schools more inclusive. So I'm happy to be part of the conversation.
And then last but not least, Darla.
Hi, everybody. I'm Darla Linville. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in Augusta, Georgia. I'm associate professor now. And I identify as lesbian or dyke or queer. And I have been advocating for queer youth in various spaces, the public library, after school programs in the high school I worked in, and now at the university that I work at for a long time. I mean, who knows how long? I can't even remember. I'm so old now.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. And as you may have noticed, Elisa's been dropping in their bios if you want to know a little bit more about our panelists today in the chat. And we're going to go right into, we do this in about 3 rounds. The first round, I will ask the panelists one question that they will each answer. And then the second round, they'll have about 3 minutes to answer. And then the second round, the panelists will each ask each other a question that they had devised or drafted or had chosen from a list of questions. And then in the third round, which will be about the last 10 to 15 minutes before we close, our audience is asked, to put questions in the chat and ask our panelists either specifically or collectively a question that you have as an audience. So as you're hearing them speak, jot down your questions. And then when the audience time comes, please put them in the chat so we can lift them up and share them with everyone. All right. With that, we can go ahead and get started. So our first question this evening, which is for all the panelists, is, if I can find my question. Oh, here we go. It's a 3-parter. And somehow you are expected to answer it in under 3 minutes, in 3 minutes or under. How have your experiences in urban ed at the GC helped to foster your commitment and ability to engage in the work that you're doing today? We will put this question in the chat. If Elisa hasn't been able to do it yet, she will, or I will. How have your experiences of queerness and breaking binaries, I can't pronounce that word today, shifted over the course of your career? And can you share with us a story of queering your classroom, school, and or community in your professional life now? So you can answer those 3 questions how you see fit and intertwine your answers through there. So let's start with Jose, then we'll go to Amy, and then we'll go with Darla, because then Darla's going to pick up the second round. Sorry, that's what I meant to do the first time.
Thank you. So I'll start off just by saying, at the GC and just through this program, meeting amazing individuals that have helped shape not only my experience as an educator, but just my thinking about what's possible. I think I've always sought out to be involved in either fellowships or just other communities, because I've sort of felt my life lacked that at some point. So the GC kind of was another one, another community that kind of also bled into all the other groups that I was in. So from the Proud Educator Network that was founded by Professor Wayne Reed at Brooklyn College, that then kind of connected me to the GC and to Michelle Fine, to Maria Elena Torre, all, professors that have impacted my thinking about what schools can be, what they should be. And I guess that has led me to, one, just be more radically open in my own space as a school leader, knowing that I have the power, to some degree, a power and a privilege, and how to use that to create a space that's more welcoming and affirming. So I come out to my school, I come out to students, something that took a while because as a teacher, I didn't do it. And I felt that if I, as a school leader, if I did that, I would be empowering teachers to do it and students to do it. Starting a gender and sexuality alliance at the elementary school level was something that there's only a couple of schools in New York City that have one, and sort of fighting for that, getting funding, has just been part of queering the school in a way, just making it possible for people to see different kinds of lived experiences that students have, and really focusing the school in advocacy, sort of fighting for social justice has been definitely something that the Graduate Center has impacted me in doing, from just the coursework to the people that are in the program, my fellow cohort members. I think it has imparted to me how to just lead better, or lead from a space of authenticity and just radical self-love. I'll end there.
Thank you. Amy?
So I see you, Jose, I hear you, and I feel what you've said. The experience at GC for me was, I think, different in the early aughts than it would have been if I had gone there now. When I was there, I was not out at work. And while I was at the GC, I did end up coming out at work, and I'm a middle school teacher, same middle school that I started at in 1995. But the GC really was a place where I learned to think more critically, and I started looking at intersections of power and privilege, and who has it and who doesn't, and how to get into those missing places and fill them with light, and lift voices and expand awareness. And that as kind of an academic foundation supported me in my own journey as a closeted school teacher who, in my very early days, would post these like really covert visual signals of queer positivity, like the tiniest rainbow sticker over there on the bulletin board. Like I was so afraid. And, kids knew something was weird because I wasn't talking about the boyfriend. Kids knew something was different because I wore those boots, and kids thought, so it was, even though it's a blended school in a lot of ways, there was no queer visibility whatsoever. And it wasn't until I was really harassed, bullied, and intimidated by those mean 7th grade girls who were not my students, that I was like, I either am gonna stop working here or come out. And coming out was the smart thing to do, and I was really glad about doing it. And what was wonderful is how the queer kids were like, I'm so grateful, and they would like literally physically embrace me with their gratitude, because here I am, this regular old cisgender white lady who's queer, who's a lesbian, and it was super meaningful for them. So I thank the GC for the power that I gained by being in conversations with the smart people there, and by reading the smart things that were on my syllabi, but also taking that, coming out myself, and then really kind of finding my own roar, and really leaning into it in ways that I wouldn't have known how to earlier. So thanks, GC.
I love that. Finding your own roar. I feel like Elisa was about to capture that in the text. Yeah, I knew it. I could read her mind. Darla, take it away.
So how lucky to hear Jose and Amy talk about their experiences in schools. And I just want to say, I mean, people, it's one thing to advocate for queer and trans youth at the high school level or at the college level, but elementary and middle school, that's hard work. That is hard work, and there's so much pushback. And what Jose and Amy are doing is really amazing in their schools. Then I have to start by saying this this term that I've learned living in the South, and it goes like this: y'all. And it means everything that you want it to mean. Whatever you want it to mean, that's what it means. So here it means y'all, the GC. Can you believe it? Like, when I left the GC, I thought this is what an academic community is supposed to be. And then I started working in higher ed and I realized it's not necessarily like that. But the GC is, and this group, this urban ed community is kind of a magical community. And it's so, it's like, it moves me to talk about it because it's such a special place to me. And I think about it as a place where people, and these might be faculty and students, it might be among students, it might be within the other centers that are available within the GC, like CLAGS was a very important unit for me, a very important source of learning for me while I was there, but a place where people hold each other and hold each other up, you know, sort of elevate each other's work, but also hold each other accountable to do better work. And I think it's such an incredible space for doing those things, for making me a better thinker and also a better person. And that it, you know, it's just not guaranteed that that's what you find when you work in academia. That's not necessarily what it's going to be. And so I keep coming back, you know, this community is still so important to me as my intellectual community, as my affective community, as the place where I learn those things and still continue to what Amy and Jose have said, learn to be braver and learn to stand up better for those things that I want to stand up for, learn to say those things in research and in activism in my work that I want to say, you know, and stand for the queer kids better. Even sometimes I have the ideas, but I might not be as brave as I want to be in saying it. And so this community here, these are the people who help me to be as brave as I want to be.
Same.
Thank you for that. And thank you to all of you for sharing your personal stories and experiences with around queering your communities, your schooling communities, education. With that. And so for that, we're gonna end there and go on to our second round, and each of the panelists will ask each other their specific question. And Darla will ask Jose the first question, which I will drop in the chat.
So Jose, what is a specific challenge or challenges that you are facing or noticing in queering schooling during the pandemic? Or how has the pandemic affected your work doing this work?
I mean, none of us could have predicted that this would be our life for almost nearly a year. Before COVID, our school had been auditing our classroom libraries. The kids had been auditing their library for representation, for you know, different types of family structures, whether the characters in the books looked like them or didn't. Teachers had done that for their curricular materials. We had all these discussions around implicit bias and anti-racist pedagogy, and read text that I was getting from the GC and bringing right straight into our workshops, and they were excited. And then COVID happened, and it was out of nowhere. We were getting ready to purchase all these new books, revamp our curriculum for the following year, but really preparing for that. and then we were just thrown for just a whirlwind. You know, a lot of the GSA that I mentioned earlier, they were meeting regularly. They had decided to do a fundraiser to get books, LGBTQIA books, into each classroom library that they would have bought themselves. So they were researching what books to buy. And, you know, COVID left us a bit detached, even though we were connected digitally and our teachers did start doing live teaching right away. Some of these little clusters of community, our school just was, you know, people entering all the time, parents, community, you know, CBOs, and just moving digitally to this space became quite a challenge for that connection that we were starting to build. I think by now, you know, our school is in person, and elementary schools have been open in person. So about half of our school is there. Just the challenge of keeping the momentum of doing radical work in a school building when half the people aren't there, but they are digitally is definitely one of the challenges. And then just sort of all the city, you know, the politics of COVID, education during COVID has sort of affected a bit of our abilities to do the things that we were doing before. I will say, however, that our teachers are just as committed. We did have to kind of buy a digital curriculum, something that our school, we design our own, but this was a space where it was hard to create materials because you can't hand them off. And just, so, you know, choosing a curriculum and realizing, oh, this is why we create our own. This is not good enough. Or this, you know, what they're saying is, you know, all the characters are illustrated. There's not, the stories are not as deep. We go out and find stories that are more meaningful and maybe sometimes might be controversial. And I have those conversations with parents about, you know, what they think is appropriate. And I love having those conversations because I wish my school when I was growing up had them. That, you know, there are folks that in our school that are trans. There are kids in our school that are trans. There are kids that have two moms, two dads, and they deserve to have themselves and their families reflected in the books that they read, just like everyone else. When I put it in those terms, it's hard for them to say, but no. And you know, there's still resistance, and some folks might not be, you know, will say, I respect your opinion, I respect your decision, but I'm not happy with. And I'm okay with that. I don't know if I'm gonna please everyone or that is the goal, but rather making space for everyone.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that perspective into what it's like to lead a school right now during this time and still do the radical work that you're doing around queering the community and allowing for members of your community, queer, not queer, to understand that we are, you know, all a part of this community and have a right to be visible and be seen, both through the curriculum and staff and engagements, etc. So next, Jose, you're going to ask Amy her question and I'll pop it into the chat for everyone to see.
So Amy, how do policy and practice converge as they relate to queer issues in schools? Specifically, can you share with us a few highlights and bumps in the road from your journey over the last 25 years working with kids, families, and teachers in public school policy and practice?
Yeah, I also want to add administrators to that. Those of us in education know very clearly that policy and practice are not the same thing at all. And you can have stuff on the books that's not going down in real life. And you can have stuff that's going down in real life that's not on the books. And that's not a judgment about any of them. It's to say, though, that when we have policy in place, it supports practice. And, you know, so many of us have been doing that, like, outlier, renegade, pedagogical stuff for a long time, and we get brought into the principal's office because some families got, you know, a question or a concern or something like that. And even though you have, you know, 75 kids going, this is the greatest thing I've ever learned, you get brought into the principal's office for that one thing, for that one family and that one person, and then sometimes you get shut down. And my philosophy has always been to do the forgiveness rather than the permission move. So, but you know, interestingly, there's so many ways that policy is too slow for the real dynamic, lifetime, earthy, breathing, you know, germy space that schools wonderfully are. And like, you know, I remember, I don't know if it was like, 06 maybe, I think it was 06, 07. A seventh grader in our building was walking home from school, and somebody leaned out the window and splashed a whole entire big gulp all over them. So it was off the school grounds, and they were certainly targeted. You know, the verbal language that was expressed, you know, it was a hate crime, an assault specifically related to his sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. So when he came to me just like absolutely shaken, like, and so I brought him to the principal. And she said to him, what do you think I should do about this? And I was aghast and I was furious. Why in the world are we asking a 12, 13-year-old to make the decisions that an adult with graduate degrees and status and like, wrong? How about you call the police station? Like, whatever is the case here, like whatever our approach was going to be, asking him, like, you know, feed me my lines was the wrong thing to do. You know, another occasion was, you know, I work in a middle school, but I'm a GSA advisor at a high school. And, you know, this guidance counselor I wasn't familiar with reached out to me and said, you know, I have a mom who really wants to support her gay son. And she knows he attends your GSA meetings and stuff. And how can, you know, he just won't open up to her. And what was true is that she didn't have a gay son. She had a trans daughter. And she had no idea. And it had everything to do with the ways in which she had created these absolute, like, impenetrable boundaries for her daughter and herself to come to this. So that was this whole amount of stuff that, you know, I kind of didn't have training for, and I kind of was going out on a limb. And here I am, like, teaching the counselor about how to be a counselor and teaching them. It was awkward and weird and real, and it was the best thing to have happened. You know, we brought her in, we just, you know, and it turns out that the family ended up, you know, bringing her for the, you know, name change ID card and the, you know, and to get HRT. Like, a lot of really positive things happened. You know, in terms of, I know that I can really talk a lot about this because what my practice is does and does not reflect the current policy. So I work in New Jersey, and I'll try to speed up and talk about how, you know, many of us remember when Tyler Clementi died. And even though I will not ever say too many things that are positive about Chris Christie's tenure as governor, I will always give it up for him instituting the HIB laws, the harassment, intimidation, and bullying laws. And so that way, when reported incidents about all protected demographic categories, including sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, went on the books, all of a sudden schools became accountable to make sure the kids are safe. That was game changing. Shortly thereafter, there was the, like, you know, can we have gender neutral bathrooms or not? And we pushed forward for one, like, you know, there we are getting on the mic at the school board meeting and got one. But on top of that, there was the Chris Christie, again, his second move here, made state policy be the case that transgender kids get to, thank you, use the bathroom that matches their own gender identity. And so nobody else gets to make that decision, just the kids. So that's really, you know, wonderful and important. And, you know, how this plays out with queering the curriculum that, and here's the latest and greatest, and then I'll stop now, but the most important one right this minute is that it's now a state mandate that all New Jersey schools in grades 5 through 12, now let me pause, California was first, some activists in San Francisco, and then now California itself, maybe Oakland, sorry about that, I can't reference that correctly. They were first, you know, like all social studies classes, 8 through 12 have to include the contributions of queer people in the curriculum. New Jersey does them one better and says everybody from 5 through 12 across all content areas need to have exposure to the contributions of queer people and queer life, queer existence, the normalcy of it for, social emotional learning reasons, for curricular reasons, all the, New Jersey state learning standards put in the queer stuff. And it landed in September of 2020. All of us, of course, went on lockdown and stuff. So it's tumbling forward. But again, policy and practice aren't the same thing, but policy always supports practice. And New Jersey has some really good stuff on the books that teachers can rely on.
Thank you for lifting up that connection between policy and practice, because it often goes both unexamined, or like we're not paying attention, right, to that connection. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective. Darla, no, yep. So Amy, you're gonna ask Darla her question.
Hey, Dee.
And before you do that, does anybody recognize the name LA, Dr. Gabay, LA Gabay?
Yeah, that's Lee Gabay.
Lee
He's
Gabay.
from
Okay,
cohort
great.
4.
Okay, so we can.
So Darla, what is the promise and where are the roadblocks to queering education today, before, during, and or after the pandemic? Can you share one story or example?
So I think the roadblocks continue to be really clear, and just following on what Amy was giving us with the connection between policy and practice, policy does not equal practice. Just because the policy's on the books doesn't mean that's what's happening in the school, but we certainly feel it when the policies get rolled back. When we've had some support for something that we're doing, even some of the federal civil rights guidance that's not actual policy, not codified into law, but we have this guidance and it supports us for what we want to do. But then when that is rolled back, I mean, we certainly feel that in schools, and we feel that we don't have the same kind of backing. There's not that thing that we can, that touchstone that we can rely on to say, but it puts us at risk legally if we don't do this for kids, or if we're not doing this in our schools, in our classrooms, in our facilities, whatever it is that we're doing. And so the roadblock that I want to talk about is that the schools are these very binary things. They're built on binaries. They're built on binary gender and sorting kids into gender, and they're built on disciplining minds and bodies. That's part of what schools as institutions do, and in some places to a greater extent. Think Georgia. Some places maybe to a lesser extent, maybe New York City or New Jersey. But it depends on the school, probably. It depends on which exact locale you're in. It depends on who your leader is. If you have Jose Jimenez as your school leader, then you have a better chance of not coming down quite so elbow in the back on the discipline factor, maybe. Have a little bit more latitude for a variety of identities in the building. So I think that's the roadblock for queering education, is that the foundation of schools, the existence that they're built on, the role that schools play in society is to discipline bodies and minds into these binary roles. And one of the things that we've seen happen during the pandemic is, and I wish I had looked up this paragraph because I'm going to reference something that I can't reference really at all. But you'll remember in March or April last year that Arundhati Roy wrote this beautiful piece about the things that the pandemic is offering to us, that it's letting us see a different way of doing the world, and that we don't want to go back. In fact, we don't want to go back to the way that it was before. Right. So that was a terrible paraphrase of what she said, but you'll be able to find it. It's kind of everywhere right now. So I think one of the opportunities right now, one of the things that's possible, thank you, Elisa. You're awesome for posting that. Is that we've seen these different access points for educational opportunities, and the ways that those access points meet the needs of a bunch of different bodies and identities and neuro capacities, and whatever it is, that some students are really thriving by not having to be in a school building all day, that not having to be in that social milieu that can be very assaultive and violent for them, that some students are totally, I understand, not thriving in the online situation, but for some students, it's offering them a chance to connect with greater, larger, more diverse communities of students who share identities with them. I was just talking to a friend of mine who works in the San Francisco school district, and he has this amazing job where he helps coordinate the GSAs across the whole district and helps run after school programs for kids called Q groups. And it just seems incredible. And I love that the whole district is doing this. And one thing that being online has offered to students there, he said, is that students who are in a school that's not as friendly to queer kids, where they maybe find themselves a little bit more isolated, online, in these online GSA meetings or online Q groups, have been able to find a greater community. And so there are pieces of this that, and I know the disability community has talked about this quite a lot, but there are pieces of this that maybe we want to keep as an opportunity, an option for creating greater access.
Thank you for sharing those different experiences from both your personal connections with the Q groups and just your perspective on how queer students might be experiencing the pandemic right now, right? From one end of the spectrum to the other, where they're finding greater opportunities for support and community where otherwise they may not be able to. So with that ends our second round of panel to panelist discussion. And we're gonna open it up to our audience right now. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. If they're for a particular panelist, please put the @ and their first name. Or if they're for all of them, then just put the question in and we'll share it out.
Or if you don't have any questions, we'll just keep talking at you on and on and on.
We also, and it could be a follow-up, it could be just a general inquiry that you have. We also have questions here. So while our guests,
I see a couple people typing.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Elisa, should I pop in one of ours? All right, great. We always. So here, oh wait, hold on. Majida has one. Hers will trump mine. Well, we don't use that word. We'll ask. Okay, so we have a question from Majida and then from Kirsten Green. So Majida asks, I'm thinking about teacher education, how we haven't caught up with what we need to do to queer the curriculum. Any thoughts on how we need to queer the curriculum, especially with regards to teacher education? So who would like to take that one? And then we'll have someone else answer Kirsten's question.
You want me to? So for me, I think it's so important to take up space. And back to the GC Roar, that helped me learn how to push boundaries away and fill in the space with wonderful queer stuff. And that taking up space has, we have the opportunity to be really super purposeful about it, and it has to do with whether it's curricular signals and instruction using queer content, or whether it's space signals and the ways in which, what are the hallways like here? What's the school culture like here? How would a queer person feel here? Would they feel invisible? Would they feel seen? Would they feel heard? Would they feel, welcome? All those questions. In terms of taking up space, like there's the whole again and again and again, make the road by walking. If you don't see it done, figure it out anyways. And there's the, we have like this ally week. And I remember like GLSEN came out with no name calling week. And I was like, that's dumb. That's like, the kid the smart ass kid I was like, well then name call the other 51 weeks. That's cool. Free reign. Let's do it. But come on. So at the Ally Week, we had people, we tabled at the front of the school and invited people to take the Ally Week pledge. You sign your name, you put your grade, we take the little receipt. We give you this rainbowed thing that lets you know that you're awesome is what we actually say to them. But we take those little receipts and paste, that long bulletin board paper that schools have. Sure enough, it turns into a bar graph. And on the announcements, we're making competitions. In fourth place, we have the ninth graders who came in with us and such. And so over the week, people are like, oh, come on, let's get some. And then we hang that whole entire banner that has everybody's names, the teachers, the students, what grade, this and that, visibly in the most highly trafficked area of the school. Like, we agree that allyship is important. Here's what it can look like. The thing also about like including picture books. Everybody loves a picture book, but bringing just in the queer picture book is like, oh God, here she comes with gay stuff. As opposed to if you bring in picture books along similar themes that are culturally responsive, etc. I've been doing this thing where I teach the elements of fiction. Like this week, we're just doing setting, and I'll bring in a book that reflects these folks in my class, and then Tuesday's another one, Wednesday's another one, and Thursday is always the gay day or the queer day. I always put a queer book on Thursday, and I ask people the exact same questions over time, so it doesn't look like I'm pushing my queer agenda. It's that we're learning the elements of fiction through these really amazing books, like Julian is a Mermaid, Red, Princess and Princess, all these ones that have come out, and now like the market is being flooded with them. So everybody has access to stuff like this. Gael, I'm sure, has gay books right there on the shelf, and I'm really excited about that. In terms of, intersectionalizing so our school still kind of expects us to do a Black History Month thing, a Women's History Month thing, but guess what? I'm putting in change makers for right now. And you're going to have Colin Kaepernick. You're going to have Eugene Goodman. You're going to have Cori Bush. You're going to have Lena Waithe. You're going to have Laverne Cox. You're going to have Billy Porter. And so you can pick from the people who you feel like you want to research this week, but bet there's queer folks on that list. I'll close with this one, or these two actually, hopefully brief ones. One time when I was in the GSA a number of years ago, we had an intersex person who was experiencing a lot of really fraught assault and danger in the household, like being forced to dress a particular way, pronouns weren't being honored, being forced into HRT without their willingness or consent, even though they were 14, 15 years old or whatever. And so when I was asking a friend of mine who's a high school biology teacher about what kinds of work do you do around, when you're doing biology and when you're doing like endocrinology or when you're doing anatomy, what's the material that you use for intersex? And he goes, like no clue. The teacher didn't know, right? So these are all the, multiple ways, but one of the things also is like when I knew that this New Jersey mandate was going to be coming down the pike, again, policy practice, a whole bunch of schools aren't going to be doing anything. A whole bunch of principals or a whole bunch of teachers are just going to be like, I'm going to sit this one out. I got so many things to do. There's reasons. And so I went to the Bergen County Curriculum Consortium and spoke with the head gal there whose job it is to perform these evaluations in each of the districts called QSAC. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's like this quality control. And you got to, read through what your curriculum guides are and this and that and the other. And I said, unless you put this on the QSAC list, it's not getting done. And she goes, all right, let me one better you. Let me go ahead and do an all call to districts with their like best and brightest, as she said, to come in to develop a curriculum that all of these districts can now have on the binder, in the binder on their shelves. And we all know what a binder on the shelf is. I'm sure a lot of us have a lot of binders on a lot of our shelves that we put there, and we probably haven't opened. But at least, Madeline, I see you. But sure enough, it begins the initiative of forcing your practice to match the policy. And so like, that's the roar. That's the taking up space. That's the going at it from a granular level, going at it at a teacher, administrator, and then at this, larger policy level. And I'm so proud to be a part of this work, and also approaching the union, NJEA, like I'm a SOGI member who's, knocking down those doors. Like there's a lot of angles you can work. that can be worked. And it's important to stay in conversation so we can remember, oh, I didn't think about that one, or I didn't think about that one either, and keep encouraging each other to further the work every day.
Yeah, it sounds, there's still a lot of activism and on the ground work that has to happen to push it forward, both from the local level and the institutional level, right? Pushing those policies, making noise. Going into Kirsten's question, and I'm gonna try and copy it and put it back in the chat so that everyone can read it, because I can't do justice to her voice and I really don't want to summarize Kirsten's question. So if you all can take a moment, and then if Darla, Jose, or even Amy wants to answer it, we have about another 5 to 6 minutes of our audience questions.
Kirsten, would you mind reading it? Can we get Kirsten's voice to, Kirsten, would you mind reading what you wrote there? Oh, wait, did you?
Hi.
Okay, good.
So what advice do you have for teacher ed faculty and candidates who are in the process of transitioning as educators in the classroom? I ask this as a bisexual human who's recently also out as non-binary, who's been mostly closeted since they've been in my current tense changing. I ended up coming out in the classroom this past fall after a transphobic incident happened in my classroom. In that moment, it dawned on me how complicit I've been in perpetuating the harm of binaries against my own body, and I've missed the opportunity to empower students as well as myself. Multiple students came out to me after I did, and it's led to some deep and meaningful work with teacher candidates in the field. That said, I have some anxiety about how my colleagues will perceive me updating my pronouns once we're back in person, and some candidates have expressed concern about transitioning or coming out once they're employed. So any thoughts you have are welcome.
I definitely want to hear Jose talk about this, because I think he has some things to say about it, but I just want to insert a comment in between Amy's comment from last time and what I imagine Jose might be saying, which I was typing in the chat and then it got bisected by the question. So I also think that a thing that we're not doing in teacher education is thinking about sexuality and gender identities as celebratory and beautiful and valuable and joy-filled, but for the most part we're thinking about them as the how do we save the victims of bullying, or the how do we keep the queer kids from killing themselves conversations. And I think that's a fear of sexuality and gender in general, that we just don't know how to talk about it very well, and we don't teach people how to talk about it very well. And I wish that we had some better language around that so that we could really embrace some of those things that happen, like at the elementary level all the time. Kids are just so queer all the time. Anyway, that's my insertion in between. But I know, Jose, you must have something to say about this, about being out and what it offers.
Yeah, when there's definitely a lot of fear, right, that before doing anything, any declaration, any affirming yourself in any space. For me, after doing it, the reward, whether it was a child coming out and feeling empowered to do so, and then writing me a letter saying that, I saw your picture on the bulletin board, and I thought that was very brave. From teachers, feeling like I work in an environment where I could be myself, and knowing that and feeling that and knowing that translates to how they're teaching and what they're teaching. I think in academia is the same thing. It's going to have ripple effects, more positive, I think, and has been my experience. I'm sure there are folks that might be saying things that I'm not hearing, or some that have said things. I think it just grounds your purpose, though, even more, and solidifies the impact that you can have. So I think teacher ed, as it was mentioned earlier, is a bit behind. I think these topics are shied away from, or when they're spoken about, they're always steeped in controversy, and that's what and that just perpetuates the fear, like, oh, well, I'm not doing that. I just read that this person got fired, or I read that this, the terrible experience they went through. Why would I want to put myself through that? And not so much is shared about the wonders that happen when people are radically themselves in spaces where people would rather them not be. I think the allies will show up, maybe some that you didn't even know were there, and people will start, you're chipping away at the fabric of the heteronormative, the structure that is there, that everyone knows needs to be chipped away at, but no one wants to actually pick up the hammer or the pitchfork and actually do it. So colleagues of mine that other principals, we talking about, policy and practice, every school is supposed to put up signs with, LGBT that have the letters and who to go to, the guidance counselor, or, respect for all. And I've heard colleagues, I don't put it up. I don't want parents to then ask me, why are you doing this at elementary school? So the DOE sends it to you and it goes, in a closet. They don't put these signs up. In our schools, all over the place. And she, one colleague in particular was like, how just by you doing it, it opens the space for somebody else. She had never considered putting them up and just saying, I can handle a conversation with a parent or with somebody that might have an objection, because I know that that principal over there does it. And I know that that person over there, is doing it. And so it sometimes, movements begin with just small little acts of people doing the thing that nobody else is doing but wants to do. So I would just say, do it. Be yourself that's definitely something you say to everyone, but be yourself in any space, and the right people will show up to have your back.
Thank you so much for that, Jose and Darla. I'd also like to add that there's the real reason why we don't. The real reason why we don't being, will I be in danger on whatever level? I better not have too much affection for my car tires, or I better not be okay with not being called into the principal's office yet again for whatever it is. And then I think one of the things that for me, I said it before, but the whole thing about you're just pushing your own queer agenda. Nobody else is like this. It's just you. And so that gaslighting piece warrants unpacking for sure. But there's the whole way that we do this kind of work about identities all the time that we don't share. So specifically, I'm thinking about being a 6th grade writing teacher. And sure enough, right there at the end of December, everybody's kind of busted, we want vacation, this and that. So I'm like, all right, let's go ahead and just write a synthesis essay. I'll throw some real simple texts out that are about, and so the prompt is something like, what are some of the commonalities between Christmas, Kwanzaa, and Hanukkah? And so I had this kid, and so we learn how to, call, and we learn how to, all the things that you do about, how to do that for, if you're 11. And then, the parent who said, what, I'm not cool with this, our family does not believe in these things and this and that and the other. And it was so rewarding to be able to say, I just want to personally share with you, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Christian, and I'm not Black. This is the work of anthropology, where we get to see the world through other people's eyes. And we also learn writing skills that are going to be transferable forever. So it's actually nothing personal. I don't have a personal investment in this. And if your kid wants to write a different one, that's great. But the truth also is that when you put the texts out, it gives kids the chance to look at them whether or not they pick that one. And they're there in the hopper. And bet, bunch of queer kids, not out yet. They're not saying anything in public, but they are reading those in private. And so when it does come to me doing an out thing, or me being doing a queer thing, or, problematizing my own cisgender normativity, et cetera, the language that I'm using is supported by the work that we've always been doing. Difference is the norm. We're all kinds of ways different from each other. It's just a different version of awesome. What kind are you? And we can move on with that. So, Kirsten, I know that you flood your work with justice initiatives, with justice language, with justice notions. And it should not stop at your feet. It should go into your heart and mind also, right? We all matter. We all count. We all get to be out as our true selves. And that's just that's a principle that I've decided, and again, thanks to my GC roar, but I also have you all backing me up. If I'm like, I'm getting gaslighted like crazy. And sure enough, I have this cadre of JC people who are like, oh, no. Like, let's change the perspective and let's analyze what the power is here and who's using it for what. So I'm so grateful for those skills. And in all of our vulnerable moments, and we have them, maybe this is a new vulnerable moment. But we've done hard things before. We've been vulnerable before. We'll be all right. We have each other, right? That's the most important thing that we have, next to having ourselves.
Such a wonderful way to close out this panel. Darla, did you want 30 seconds to tagline us out?
Here's a one sentence tag out. So one thing that like queer theory or queer studies asks us is, how did things become like this? Or how did these things become powerful and these things become not powerful, or normal and not normal? And do they have to be this way? And I think we can always keep asking that question. Do things have to be this way? Which applies, across the board in schools, the ways that we are inclusive and exclusive, the ways we're welcoming and not welcoming. Do things have to be this way?
Love that. Love the points of both advice and guidance and just wisdom around picking up, how did Jose say it? Picking up the little axes to chip away at what we have to do. Bringing together policy and practice that's been disjointed, challenging each other to trouble heteronormativity. And really, Darla, I just drew a blank on what you just said. The last part, I'm sorry, I'm getting nervous now. I'm gonna start sweating.
You'll still look great. Just so you know that there's a historical trajectory, the way that some things became powerful and some things became not, that binaries got constructed, and we can always interrogate that.
Yes, interrogating what we see as normal right now, right? So these are all the things that we have to continue to do as we're queering our classroom and school and community, engaging in the practice of doing so from wherever we stand, right? As humans, I mean, if Mother Nature gave us a gazillion types of flowers and insects, why would Mother Nature only give us 2 genders and 2 ways of, 2 sexualities, whatever it is, right? Why can't we be diverse as humans as well? So with that, Alisa, do you have any closing remarks?
I'm just so blown away in my heart, most of all, but also in my mind and I guess in my body. I'm like, I want to like get out there and do something. You guys are doing things every day in this fight. So thank you. I think most of all, just thank you, period. Darla, Amy, Jose, and of course, Lisette. Thank you. Thank you for creating this experience for all of us tonight. And for everybody who's here, please hang on to the next date of April 6th. We're not exactly sure on the time yet, but it is going to be yet another rock star lineup of GC alums. Couple of them in the little boxes at the top here tonight, I see. And we'll keep you posted about that topic and time. So stay tuned for that. And our Racial Justice Student Fund is still rocking. So and there's still swag to be sent. So it will.
What was our last number, Alisa? Everybody.
Oh, we're like approaching 4,000, I think, aren't we?
We're in the thousands, and some of those contributions are recurring. So we have members who have added recurring contributions, which is great. Every dollar is a vote for urban ed in the GC. And we want to make sure that the CUNY world and the university world knows that GC is loved, and especially urban ed is loved and supported in the CUNY world when it comes to funding. So we want to show that by bumping up that Racial Justice Student Fund. As we close out, we want to thank all the panelists. We want to thank all of our guests for joining in this conversation. To our panelists, thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom and your words and your love with us. We really appreciate that and need that, especially in this time more than ever. And Alisa, did I forget any more closeout
I think, oh, I was gonna
Lost our checklist.
throw some things in the chat if folks want them. Hold on, before you leave, let me just throw these last couple of things in the chat. Here we go. Just because, you know, we gotta finish our pitches. There's the link to donate.
Yes.
Here's our
Next date.
YouTube channel, which oops, the link didn't work. Hold on. We have a YouTube channel where we have our first one with Majida and Edwin and Brian is there, and I still need to finish editing the next ones, including tonight. We'll throw them up there. So please pass along the word that Urban Ed 20 years and going strong. So you all, the three of you tonight, you brought it. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And thank you to Wendy, Christine, and Matt, who really manage everything behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, everywhere. Thank you, everyone. Well, you all have a great night. It was a pleasure as always.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Lisa and
everyone.
Elisa. Thanks for
Lisa, Lisette,
convening.
thank you so much. And Darla and Jose, it was a real privilege.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I look
Pleasure,
forward
for
to
sure.
another occasion.
Yeah.
Yeah.